The sun burned down on the cracked asphalt highway, stretching endlessly through the quiet countryside. Dust shimmered in the air like gold, and a lone figure stood beside a silver motorcycle, the back tire hissing softly. The woman leaned against the bike, sweat glistening at her temple, her leather jacket unzipped halfway. Her name was Raven Steele, and though her clothes were simple, nothing about her life truly was. She wasn't just another traveler stranded on a rural road. She was one of the youngest billionaires in America, hiding her face beneath a pair of scratched sunglasses and trying for the first time in years to live like everyone else. But fate was waiting for her that afternoon, on that empty stretch of road where a single dad, his hands calloused and heart weary, would stop to help her. If you believe that kindness still exists, that second chances can change lives, and that one act of compassion can rewrite a story, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness, because today's story is one you won't forget. Raven had left everything behind: the meetings, the boardrooms, the cameras, the people who smiled at her for her money but never for her heart. After a very public breakup with a man who saw her only as a trophy, she vanished from the public eye. She wanted silence, she wanted to feel real. And so, she traded her luxury car for a second-hand motorcycle, put on an old leather jacket, and decided to ride across small towns where no one knew her name. It was supposed to be freeing, until the bike sputtered, coughed, and finally died on a lonely road 20 miles from the nearest gas station. Meanwhile, Luke Harper, a single father of a 7-year-old girl named Mia, was driving home after his last shift at the auto repair shop. His truck was old and dented, the kind that told stories of years of sacrifice. He worked double shifts to keep food on the table and his daughter in school. Every night, when he tucked Mia into bed, he promised her that one day things would be better, that one day life would smile on them again. But lately, even that promise was getting harder to believe. When Luke saw the stranded biker, he slowed instinctively. She didn't look like she was from around there, her boots too polished, her bike too rare for a country road. Still, he pulled over. "Need a hand?" he asked, stepping out of the truck, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. Raven looked up, guarded at first, then nodded. "Yeah, I think my rear tire blew out." Luke crouched beside the motorcycle, running his hands over the tire's edge, checking the chain and inspecting the rim. "You're lucky it didn't give out on the turn back there," he said quietly. He looked up and smiled, a genuine, simple smile that made her heart flicker in a way she hadn't felt in years. As he worked, she watched him. There was something deeply grounding about the man, his patience, his steady focus, the way he treated even a stranger's bike like it mattered. When he was done, he straightened up and said, "You'll need a new tire. Closest shop's closed till morning. You can leave it here or I can tow it back to my place and fix it in the morning." Raven hesitated. She didn't usually accept help from strangers, but there was no arrogance in his tone, just quiet decency, so she nodded. "All right, thanks." Luke hooked the bike to the back of his truck, and soon they were driving down the winding country road. The cab smelled faintly of oil and pine, and an old song played softly from the radio. "So," Luke said, glancing at her, "what brings a biker like you out here alone?" Raven smiled faintly. "Just needed a break from life." She didn't offer more, and he didn't press. That silence between them was oddly comfortable. When they reached his small farmhouse, Raven saw a little girl sitting on the porch swing, holding a stuffed bear. Her curly brown hair glowed in the sunset. "Daddy!" she called, running over as he stepped out. "You're home." Then she noticed Raven and blinked curiously. "Hi. Are you one of Daddy's friends?" Raven knelt, smiling. "I guess I am now." Mia grinned wide. "Do you like pancakes? Daddy makes the best ones." That night, Luke offered Raven the guest room. She wanted to refuse, but the exhaustion caught up with her. The house was small but warm, the walls filled with laughter and love. As she lay in bed later, listening to the faint sound of Mia giggling in the next room, Raven felt a strange peace she hadn't known in years. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. she walked into the kitchen to find Luke flipping pancakes while Mia sat at the table coloring. The smell of butter and coffee filled the air. "Morning," Luke said. "Hope you're hungry." It was simple, just pancakes, syrup and laughter, but for Raven it felt like a feast of humanity. She'd spent years surrounded by chefs and assistants, yet no breakfast had ever tasted so alive. Over the next few days, Luke replaced the tire and tuned the bike, refusing to take payment until it was done. But something deeper was happening. Raven found herself helping Mia with her drawings, feeding the chickens, and even sitting by the porch, watching the sunset with Luke. They talked, not about wealth or success, but about dreams, regrets, and second chances. Luke told her about losing his wife to illness, about trying to raise Mia alone, about the constant battle of keeping faith when life felt unfair. Raven listened, her chest tightening. She wanted to tell him who she really was, but the fear held her back. Would he treat her differently if he knew she could buy the entire town twice over? Would he still look at her the same way? One evening, rain poured hard, drumming against the roof. They sat inside by the fire, Mia asleep on the couch. Luke poured her some coffee. "You ever think," he said softly, "that sometimes life takes everything away just to give you something better later?" Raven looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "Maybe," she whispered, "but sometimes we're too afraid to believe it." That night she couldn't sleep. She stood at the window watching the rain trail down the glass and realized something profound. She had spent her entire life surrounded by people, yet never truly known. Here, in this humble farmhouse, she finally felt seen, not as a name, not as a billionaire, but as a woman. The next morning she made a decision. She would tell him the truth, but before she could, Luke came to her with news. He had to sell his old truck to pay for Mia's school fees and his overdue mortgage. He smiled bravely, pretending it was nothing, but Raven saw the sadness in his eyes. That night, after everyone went to bed, she quietly transferred funds through her phone, setting up a trust for Mia under an anonymous donor. She left a letter on the table, thanking Luke for his kindness, and before dawn she was gone, riding away on her repaired motorcycle, her heart aching yet alive. Days passed. Luke tried to convince himself that it didn't matter, but every time he looked at the porch he remembered her laughter, her gentle presence, the spark she brought into their lives. Then one afternoon he got a letter in the mail from a foundation he'd never heard of, offering a full scholarship for Mia's education and enough to pay off his home loan. He stared at it, disbelief written across his face. The letter wasn't signed, but tucked inside was a small piece of paper with a single line written in familiar handwriting. "Thank you for reminding me what kindness feels like." Months later, news broke about a famous billionaire philanthropist named Raven Steele, who had been donating anonymously across small towns. Luke saw her photo on TV, and his heart stopped. It was her, the biker, the woman who'd sat in his kitchen eating pancakes with his daughter. But instead of feeling betrayed, he smiled softly. He stepped out onto the porch, where Mia was playing, and looked up at the sky. "She found what she was looking for," he murmured. "And maybe we did too." A year later, at the town's summer fair, Luke was fixing an engine for a farmer when a familiar hum of a motorcycle echoed across the lot. He turned, and there she was. Raven removed her helmet, her eyes meeting his with that same quiet warmth. "Hey, mechanic," she said gently, "you still making those pancakes?" He chuckled.